Hope we're all doing well tonight. Got 3 fun stories planned. Oh, let's see. Of course, TikTok erased all the covers that I had set up. Mom's doing all right. She's being old and cranky about her physical therapy, but I can't really blame her. I mean, it sucks. I do have hair. I do. It's this is actually the shortest it's been in a long time. Um, as soon as I straighten out these images, I'll show you guys the before, what it really looked like underneath that head wrap that I always wear, which I still have on me just in case, because I hate getting hair in my face while I'm doing something. So okay, so I think we're locked down there. Let's see. I'll bring it up on my phone and just show you. So if the camera can see this. But that was my hair before. And that was what was on the floor after they cut it all off. And there was the first picture I took. Lena, we are doing 3 separate short stories today, so there won't be any beginning or middle to worry about. So I am glad you are all here. This is our second Friday night together, and I'm excited. Hey, Milky Mare, how are you? Yeah, my beard was getting a little out of control. So, but what's funny is the lady that was cutting my hair. I turn this down just a tad. Didn't believe me when I told her I'm 50 years old, because the only gray I have is actually in my beard. Everything else is all dark. But we shall see. Nice, nice. I have a friend that I've been playing Minecraft with, and we were building into this just gigantic cave, and as my luck would have it, I took a step back and immediately fell off a cliff into a gigantic chasm. So that's my luck. working a grape monster. So yeah, we hadn't even set our spawn points yet. So it ended up taking us hours to travel back to the cave. It was kind of funny. All right. Oh, we have viewers over on YouTube. If you are over on YouTube, please make yourself known. I'd love to know that you're here. Alrighty then. So we'll give a little bit of oh, Ronnie, thank you. That's just, yeah, that's a wonderful thing to hear. I love it. I have not gotten to 10K yet. I am so close. I'm under, let's see, last check I was at 4640 something. So it's getting real close. Who knows? I personally, I think I won't pass tonight, but I think Sunday it will be when we finish up Mrs. Frisbee. I think is when we'll pass that 10K. And I've actually got a couple of things, a couple of ideas for for a 10K celebration. Other than I get really happy, no, Daisy, nothing really happy. Well, okay, so within the TikTok space, 10,000 followers tends to open up some more doors within the algorithm. There's also some programs that you can get access to at 10,000 followers. But there are some other requirements to it. Tonight we have 3 separate stories, and I'll be introducing those here in a minute. But I have my celebratory plans for 10K. I have 2 things. Well, thank you, Daisy. I appreciate you. The One of the things I want to do is I have a lot of voice actor mutuals on this app, and I would like to do a live stream where I have them come on and read stuff, because some of them, you guys, I like to think that I'm good at this, but holy crap, these guys are so good. And I really can't wait to share their talent with you. The other thing, now that I am doing 3 lives a week, I would like to do an entire book that spans from Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, and then closes on Sunday. Strawberry, welcome in. Bethany, NYC. Glad to see you. What I'm hoping to do is a week where we read The Wizard of Oz. We will open it on Sunday night bedtime stories. We'll continue it on Wednesday night story time, and then we'll continue it one more time on Friday night story time, and then we'll conclude on Sunday. So it'll be in a whole week event. I'm glad that you think that would be awesome, because I think it would be awesome too. And I have a couple of artist friends who I am going to hit up for artwork for those nights, because I just think that would be amazing. I have a lot of really great people that I've met on this app, and I really want to showcase them because they're awesome. So I will keep you guys posted since you are all so enthusiastic about it. Let's see here. So I'm way behind in getting stuff going here. Well, thank you guys for the gifts. I really appreciate it. Songbird, so good to see you. Super happy that you are here. And I want to say thank you to you because I just a couple of days ago saw what you sent, and I truly appreciate it. I truly, truly appreciate it. All right. No. Uh-oh. Ah, there we go. Thought I lost the story I was going to read. Going, I don't want to have to find that and download it again. Oh, good luck. Let me know how you make out with that. I really, sincerely, I want to know. All right, so I think it is time for us to get started. Holy cow, there are 82 people in the room. That's awesome. All right. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa. Samantha, yes, I do also stream on the tubes. You can find me there under UndeadPapa as well. So, welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa, the Friday night edition. I'm really glad that you are all here tonight. We've got 3 stories lined up this evening. Each one a little bit different, but all of them kind of tend to linger when they're gone. So, wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back and relax, because story time is about to begin. Tonight's first story is about a world where one small boy can do anything he wants, and everyone else has learned the hard way to think only good thoughts. This is It's a Good Life by Jerome Bixby. Aunt Amy was out on the front porch, rocking back and forth in the high-backed chair and fanning herself, when Bill Soames rode his bicycle up the road and stopped in front of the house, perspiring under the afternoon sun. Bill lifted the box of groceries out of his big basket over the front wheel of the bike and came up the front walk. Little Anthony was sitting on the lawn playing with a rat. He had caught the rat down in the basement. He had made it think it had smelled cheese, the most rich-smelling and crumbly, delicious cheese a rat had ever thought it smelled. And it had come out of its hole, and now Anthony had hold of it with his mind and was making it do tricks. When the rat saw Bill Soames coming, it tried to run, but Anthony thought at it, and it turned to flip-flop on the grass, lay trembling, its eyes gleaming in small black terror. Bill Soames hurried past Anthony and reached the front steps, mumbling. He always mumbled when he came to the Fremont house, or passed by it, or even thought of it. Everybody did. They thought about silly things that didn't mean very much, like 2 and 2 is 4, and twice is 8, and so on. They tried to jumble up their thoughts to keep them skipping back and forth so Anthony couldn't read their minds. The mumbling helped, because if Anthony got anything strong out of your thoughts, he might take a notion to do something about it, like curing your wife's sick headaches or your kid's mumps or getting your old milk cow back on schedule or fixing the privy. And while Anthony mightn't actually mean any harm, he couldn't be expected to have much notion of what was the right thing to do in such cases. That was if he liked you. He might try to help you in his way, And that could be pretty horrible if he didn't like you. Well, that could be worse. Bill Soames set the box of groceries on the porch railing and stopped his mumbling long enough to say, "Everything you wanted, Miss Amy." "Oh, fine, William," Amy Fremont said lightly. "My, ain't it terrible hot today?" Bill Soames almost cringed. His eyes pleaded with her. He shook his head violently no, then interrupted his mumbling again, though obviously he didn't want to. "Oh, don't say that, Miss Amy. It's fine, just fine. A real good day." Amy Fremont got up from the rocking chair and came across the porch. She was a tall woman, thin, a smiling vacancy in her eyes. About a year ago, Anthony had gotten mad at her because she told him he shouldn't have turned the cat into a cat rug, and although he had always obeyed her more than anyone else, which was hardly at all, this time he'd snapped at her with his mind. And that had been the end of Amy Fremont's bright eyes, and the end of Amy Fremont as everyone had known her. And that was when word got around in Peaksville, population 46, that even the members of Anthony's own family weren't safe. After that, everyone was twice as careful. Someday, Anthony might undo what he'd done to Aunt Amy. Anthony's mom and pop hoped he would. When he was older and maybe sorry. If it was possible, that is. Because Aunt Amy had changed a lot, and besides, now Anthony wouldn't obey anyone. "Land alive, William," Aunt Amy said. "You don't have to mumble like that. Anthony wouldn't hurt you. My goodness, Anthony likes you." She raised her voice and called to Anthony, who, tired of the rat, and was making eat itself. "Don't you, dear? Don't you like Mr. Soames?" Anthony looked across the lawn at the grocery man, a bright, wet, purple gaze. He didn't say anything. Bill Soames tried to smile at him. After a second, Anthony returned his attention to the rat. It had already devoured its tail, or at least chewed it off. For Anthony had made it bite faster than it could swallow, and little pink and red furry pieces lay around it on the green grass. Now the rat was having trouble reaching its hindquarters. Mumbling silently, thinking of nothing in particular as hard as he could, Bill Soames went stiff-legged down the walk, mounted his bicycle, and pedaled off. Mumbling silently, thinking of nothing in particular... "We'll see you tonight, William," Aunt Amy called after him. As Bill Soames pumped the pedals, he was wishing deep down that he could pump twice as fast to get away from Anthony all the faster, and away from Aunt Amy, who sometimes just forgot how careful you had to be. And he shouldn't have thought that, because Anthony caught it. He caught the desire to get away from the Fremont house as if it was something bad, and his purple gaze blinked, and he snapped a small, skulky thought after Bill Soames, just a small one, because he was in a good mood today. And besides, he liked Bill Soames, or at least didn't dislike him, at least today. Bill Soames wanted to go away, so petulantly Anthony helped him. Pedaling with superhuman speed, or rather appearing to, because in reality the bicycle was pedaling him, Bill Soames vanished down the road in a cloud of dust, his thin, terrified wail drifting back across the heat. Anthony looked at the rat. It had devoured half its belly and had died from pain. He thought it into a grave out deep in the cornfield. His father had once said, smiling, that he might do that with things he killed, and went around the houser, casting his odd shadow in the hot, brassy light from above. In the kitchen, Aunt Amy was unpacking groceries. She put the mason-jarred goods on the shelves, and the meat and milk in the icebox, and the beet sugar and coarse flour in the big cans under the sink. She put the cardboard box in the corner by the door for Mr. Soames to pick up next time he came. It was stained and battered and torn and worn fuzzy, but it was one of the few left in Peaksville. In faded red letters it said Campbell's Soup. The last can of soup or anything else had been eaten long ago, except for that small communal hoard which the villagers dipped into for special occasions. But the box lingered on, like a coffin, and when it and the other boxes were gone, the men would have to make some out of wood. Aunt Amy went out in back, where Anthony's mom, Aunt Amy's sister, sat in the shade of the house, shelling peas. The peas, every time Mom ran a finger along the pod, went lollop, lollop, lollop into her pan. "William brought the groceries," Aunt Amy said. She sat down wearily in the straight-backed chair beside Mom and began fanning herself again. She wasn't really old, but ever since Anthony had snapped at her with his mind, something had been wrong with her body as well as her mind, and she was tired all the time. "Oh, good," said Mom. Lollop went the fat peas into the pan. Everybody in Peaksville always said, "Oh, fine," or "good," or "say, that's swell," when almost everything happened or was mentioned. Even unhappy things like accidents or even deaths, they always said "good." Because if they didn't try to cover up how they really felt, Anthony might overhear with his mind, and then nobody knew what might happen. Like the time Mrs. Kent's husband, Sam, had come walking back from the graveyard because Anthony liked Mrs. Kent and had heard her mourning. Lollop. "Tonight's television night," said Aunt Amy. "I'm glad I look forward to it so much every week. I wonder what we'll see tonight." "Did Bill bring the meat?" asked Mom. "Yes." Aunt Amy fanned herself, looking up at the featureless, brassy glare of the sky. "Goodness, it's so hot." "It's so hot. I wish Anthony would make it just a little cooler." "Amy!" "Oh!" Mom's sharp tone had penetrated where Bill Soames' agonized expression had failed. Aunt Amy put one thin hand to her mouth in exaggerated alarm. "Oh, I'm sorry, dear." Her pale blue eyes shuttled around right and left to see if Anthony was in sight. Not that it would make any difference if he was or wasn't. He didn't have to be near you to know what you were thinking. Usually, though, unless he had his attention on somebody, he would be occupied with thoughts of his own. But some things attracted his attention. You could never be sure just what. "This weather's just fine," Mom said. Lollop. "Oh, yes," Aunt Amy said. "It's a wonderful day. I wouldn't want it changed for the world." Lollop, lollop. "What time is it?" Mom asked. Aunt Amy was sitting where she could see through the kitchen window to the alarm clock on the shelf above the stove. 4:30, she said. Lollop. I want tonight to be something special," Mom said. "Did Bill bring a good lean roast?" "Good and lean, dear. They butchered just today, and sent us over the best piece. Dan Hollis will be so surprised when he finds out that tonight's television party is a birthday party for him, too." "Oh, I think he will. Are you sure nobody's told him?" "Everybody swore they wouldn't." "That'll be real nice." Aunt Amy nodded, looking off across the cornfield. "A birthday party." "Well," Mom put the pan of peas down beside her, stood up, and brushed her apron. "I'd better get the roast on. Then we can set the table." She picked up the peas. Anthony came around the corner of the house. He didn't look at them, but continued down on through the carefully kept garden. All the gardens in Peaksville were carefully kept, very carefully kept, and went past the rustling, useless hulk that had been the Fremont family car, and went smoothly over the fence and out into the cornfield. "Isn't this a lovely day?" said Mom a little loudly as they just went toward the back door. Aunt Amy fanned herself. "A beautiful day, dear, just fine." Out in the cornfield, Anthony walked between the tall, rustling rows of green stalks. He liked to smell the corn. The alive corn overhead and the cold, old dead corn underfoot. Rich Ohio earth, thick with weeds and brown, dry dotting ears of corn, pressed between his bare toes with every step. He had made it rain last night, so everything would smell and feel nice today. He walked clear to the edge of the cornfield and over to where a grove of shadowy green trees covered cool, moist, dark ground and lots of leafy undergrowth, and jumbled moss-covered rocks, and a small spring that made a clear, clean pool. Here Anthony liked to rest and watch the birds and insects and small animals that rustled and scampered and chirped about. He liked to lie on the cool ground and look up through the moving greenness overhead and watch the insects flit in the hazy, soft sunbeams that stood like slanting, glowing bars between ground and treetops. Somehow he liked the thoughts of little creatures in this place better than the thoughts outside. And while the thoughts he picked up weren't very strong or clear, he could get enough out of them to know what the little creatures liked and wanted. And he spent a lot of time making the grove more like what they wanted it to be. The spring hadn't always been here, but one time he had found thirst in one small furry animal and had brought subterranean water to the surface in a clear, cold flow, and had watched blinking as the creature drank, feeling its pleasure. Later he had made the pool when he found a small urge to swim. He had made rocks and trees and hushes and caves and sunlight here and shadows there, because he felt in all the tiny minds around him the desire or the instinctive want for this kind of resting place, and that kind of mating place, and this kind of place to play, and that kind of home. And somehow the creatures from all the fields and pastures around the grove had seemed to know that this was a good place, for there were always more of them coming in every time Anthony came out here. There were more creatures than the last time, and more desires and needs to be tended to. Every time there would be some kind of creature he had never seen before. Oh, excuse me. And he would find its mind and see what it wanted, and then give it to it. He liked to help them. He liked to feel their simple gratification. Today he rested beneath a thick elm and lifted his purple gaze to a red and black bird that had just come to the grove. It twittered on a branch over his head and hopped back and forth, and in its tiny thoughts, thought its tiny thoughts, and Anthony made a big, soft nest for it, and pretty soon it hopped in. A long, brown, sleek, furred animal was drinking at the pool. Anthony found its mind next. The animal was thinking about a smaller creature that was scurrying along the ground on the other side of the pool, grubbing for insects. The little creature didn't know that it was danger. The long, brown animal finished drinking and tensed its legs to leap, and Anthony thought it into a grave in the cornfield. He didn't like those kinds of thoughts. They reminded him of the thoughts outside the grove. A long time ago, some of the people outside had thought that way about him, and one night they'd hidden and waited for him to come back from the grove, and he'd just thought them all into the cornfield. Since then, the rest of the people hadn't thought that way, at least very clearly. Now their thoughts were all mixed up and confusing whenever they thought about him or near him, so he didn't pay much attention. He liked to help them too sometimes, but it wasn't simple or very gratifying either. They never thought happy thoughts when he did, just the jumble. So he spent more time out here. He watched all the birds and insects and furry creatures for a while, and played with a bird, making it soar and dip and streak madly around the tree trunks until, accidentally, when another bird caught his attention for a moment, he ran it into a rock. Petulantly, he thought the rock into a grave in the cornfield, but he couldn't do anything more with the bird. Not because it was dead, though it was, but because it had broken a wing. So he went back to the house. He didn't feel like walking back through the cornfield, so he just went to the house, right down into the basement. It was nice down here. Nice and dark and damp and sort of fragrant, because once Mom had been making preserves in a rack along the far wall, and then she'd stopped coming down ever since Anthony had started spending time here, and the preserves had spoiled and leaked down and spread over the dirt floor. And Anthony liked the smell. He caught another rat, making it smell cheese, and after he played with it, he thawed it into a grave right beside the long animal he'd killed in the grove. Aunt Amy hated rats, and so he killed a lot of them, because he liked Aunt Amy most of all, and sometimes did things that Aunt Amy wanted. Her mind was more like the little furry minds out in the grove. She hadn't thought anything bad at all about him for a long time. After the rat, he played with a big black spider in the corner under the stairs, making it run back and forth until its web shook and shimmered in the light from the cellar window like a reflection in silvery water. Then he drove fruit flies into the web until the spider was frantic, trying to wind them all up. The spider liked flies, and its thoughts were stronger than theirs, so he did it. There was something bad in the way it liked flies, but it wasn't clear, and besides, Aunt Amy hated flies too. He heard footsteps overhead, Mom moving around in the kitchen. He blinked his purple gaze and almost decided to make her hold still. But instead, he went up to the attic, and after looking out the circular window at the front end of the long X-roofed room for a while at the front lawn, and the dusty road and Henderson's tip-waving wheat field beyond, he curled into an unlikely shape and went partly to sleep. Soon people would be coming for television, he heard Mom think. He went more to sleep. He liked television night. Aunt Amy had always liked television a lot, so one time he had thought some for her, and a few other people had been there at the time, and Aunt Amy had felt disappointed when they wanted to leave. He'd done something to them for that, and now everybody came to television. He liked all the attention he got when they did. Anthony's father came home around 6:30, looking tired and dirty and bloody. He'd been over in Dunn's pasture with the other men, helping pick out the cow to be slaughtered this month, and doing the job, and then butchering the meat and salting it away in Soam's ice house. Not a job he cared for, but every man had his turn. Yesterday he had helped scythe down old McIntyre's wheat. Tomorrow they would start threshing. By hand. Everything in Peaksville had to be done by hand. He kissed his wife on the cheek and sat down at the kitchen table. He smiled and said, "Where's Anthony?" "Around someplace," Mom said. Aunt Amy was over at the wood-burning stove stirring the big pot of peas. Mom went back to the oven and opened it and basted the roast. "Well, it's been a good day," Dad said by rote. Then he looked at the mixing bowl and breadboard on the table. He sniffed at the dough. He said. "I could eat a loaf all by myself, I'm so hungry." No one told Dan Hollis about its being a birthday party, did they? His wife asked. Nope, we kept as quiet as mummies. We've fixed up such a lovely surprise. What? Well, you know how much Dan likes music. Well, last week Thelma Dunn found a record in her attic. No. Yes. And we had Ethel sort of ask without really asking, if he had that one. And he said no. Isn't that a wonderful surprise? Well, now, it sure is. A record? Imagine. That's a real nice thing to find. What record is it? Perry Como singing You Are My Sunshine. Well, I'll be damned. I always like that tune. Some raw carrots were lying on the table. Dad picked up a small one, scrubbed it on his chest, and took a bite. How did Thelma happen to find it? Oh, just looking around for new things. Dad chewed the carrot. Say, who has that picture we found a while back? I kind of liked it, that old clipper sailing along. The Smiths. Next week the Sippics get it. And they have the Smiths' old McIntyre music box, and we give the Sippics... She went down the tentative order of things that would change hands among the women at church this Sunday. He nodded. Looks like we can have the picture for a while, I guess. Look, honey, you might try to get that detective book back from the Rileys. I was so busy the week we had it, I never got to finish all the stories. I'll try, his wife said doubtfully, but I hear the Van Hoosens have a stereoscope they found in the cellar. Her voice was just a little accusing. They had it 2 whole months before they told anybody about it. Say, Dad said, looking interested. That'd be nice, too. Lots of pictures. I suppose so. I'll see on Sunday. I'd like to have it, but we still owe the Van Housens for their canary. I don't know why that bird had to pick our house to die. Must have been sick when we got it. Now there's no satisfying Betty Van Housen. She even hinted she'd like our piano for a while. Well, honey, you try for the stereoscope or just anything you think we'll like. At last he swallowed the carrot. It had been a little young and tough. Anthony's whims about the weather made it so that people never knew what crops would come up or what shape they'd be in if they did. All they could do was plant a lot, and always enough of something came up any one season to live on. Just once there had been a grain surplus. Tons of it had been hauled to the edge of Peaksville and dumped off into the nothingness. Otherwise nobody could have breathed when it started to spoil. Dad went on, it's nice to have the new things around. It's nice to think that there's probably still a lot of stuff nobody's found yet. Cellars and attics and barns and down behind things. They help somehow, as much as anything can help. Shh! Mom glanced nervously around. Oh, Dad said, smiling hastily, it's all right. The new things are good. It's nice to be able to have something around you've never seen before, and know that something you've given somebody else is making them happy. It's a real good thing. A good thing, his wife echoed. Pretty soon, Aunt Amy said from the stove, there won't be any more new things. We'll have found everything there is to find. Goodness, that'll be too bad. Amy! Well, her pale eyes were shallow and fixed, a sign of her recurrent vagueness. It will be kind of a shame, no new things. Don't talk like that, Mom said, trembling. Amy, be quiet. It's good, said Dad, in the loud and familiar, wanting to be overheard tone of voice. Such talk is good. It's okay, honey, don't you see? It's good for Amy to talk any way she wants. It's good for her to feel bad. Everything's good. Everything has to be good. Anthony's mother was pale, and so was Aunt Amy. The peril of the moment had suddenly penetrated the clouds surrounding her mind. Sometimes it was difficult to handle words so that they might not prove disastrous. You just never knew. There were so many things it was wise not to say or even think, but remonstration for saying or thinking them might just be as bad. If Anthony heard and decided to do anything about it, you could just never tell what Anthony was liable to do. Everything had to be good, had to be fine just as it was, even if it wasn't, always, because any changes might be worse, so terribly much worse. "Oh, my goodness, of course it's good," Mom said. "You talk any way you want, Amy, and it's just fine. Of course you want to remember that some ways are better than others." Aunt Amy stirred the peas, fright in her pale eyes. "Oh, yes," she said, "but I don't feel like talking right now. It's good that I don't feel like talking." Dad said tiredly, smiling, "I'm going out and wash up." They started arriving around 8 o'clock. By the time Mom and Aunt Amy had the big table in the dining room set and 2 more tables off to the side, the candles were burning and the chairs situated, and Dad had a big fire going in the fireplace. The first to arrive were the Sippics, John and Mary. John wore his best suit and was well scrubbed and pink-faced after his day in McIntyre's pasture. The suit was neatly pressed, but getting threadbare at elbows and cuffs. Old McIntyre was working on a loom designed out of school books so far it was slow going. McIntyre was a capable man with wood and tools, but a loom was a big order when you couldn't get metal parts. McIntyre had been one of the ones who, at first, had wanted to try to get Anthony to make things the villagers needed, like clothes and canned goods and medical supplies and gasoline. Since then, he felt that what had happened to the whole Terrence family and Joe Kinney was his fault, and he worked hard trying to make it up to the rest of them. And since then, no one had tried to get Anthony to do anything. Mary Sippick was a small, cheerful woman in a simple dress. She immediately set about helping Mom and Aunt Amy putting the finishing touches on the dinner. The next arrivals were the Smiths and the Dunns, who lived right next to each other down the road, only a few yards from the nothingness. They drove up in the Smiths' wagon drawn by their old horse. When the Rileys showed up from across the darkened wheat field, and the evening really began, Pat Riley sat down at the big upright in the front room and began to play from the popular sheet music on the rack. He played softly, as expressively as he could, and nobody sang. Anthony liked piano playing a lot, but not singing. Often he would come up from the basement or down from the attic, or just come and sit on top of the piano, nodding his head as Pat played Lover or Boulevard of Broken Dreams or Night and Day. He seemed to prefer ballads, sweet-sounding songs, but the one time somebody had started to sing, Anthony had looked over from the top of the piano and done something that made everybody afraid to sing from then on. Later, they decided that the piano was what Anthony heard first, before anybody ever tried to sing, and now anything else added to it didn't sound right and distracted him from his pleasure. So every television night, Pat would play the piano, and that was the beginning of the evening. Wherever Anthony was, the music would make him happy and put him in a good mood, and he would know that they were gathering for television and waiting for him. By 8:30, everybody had shown up, except for the 17 children and Mrs. Soames, who was off watching them in the schoolhouse at the far end of town. The children of Peaksville were never allowed near the Fremont house, not since little Fred Smith had tried to play with Anthony on a dare. The younger children weren't even told about Anthony. The others had mostly forgotten about him, or were told that he was a nice, nice goblin, but they must never go near him. Dan and Ethel Hollis came late, and Dan walked in, not suspecting a thing. Pat Riley had played the piano until his hands ached. He worked pretty hard with them today. And now he got up, and everybody gathered round to wish Dan Hollis a happy birthday. "Well, I'll be damned." Dan grinned. "This is swell. I wasn't expecting this at all. Gosh, this is swell." They gave him his presents, mostly things they had made by hand, though some were things that people had possessed as their own and now gave him as his. John Sippick gave him a watch charm, hand-carved out of a piece of hickory wood. Dan's watch had broken down a year or so ago, and there was nobody in the village who knew how to fix it. But he still carried it around because it had been his grandfather's, and it was a fine old heavy thing of gold and silver. He attached the charm to the chain while everybody laughed and said John had done a nice job of carving. Then Mary Sippick gave him a knitted necktie, which he put on, removing the one he'd worn. The Rileys gave him a little box they had made to keep things in. They didn't say what things, but Dan said he'd keep his personal jewelry in it. The Rileys had made it out of a cigar box, carefully peeled off its paper and lined it on the inside with velvet. The outside had been polished and carefully, if not expertly, carved by Pat, but his carving got complimented too. Dan Hollis received many other gifts: a pipe, a pair of shoelaces, a tie-pin, a knit pair of socks, some fudge, a pair of garters made from old suspenders. He unwrapped each gift with vast pleasure, and wore as many of them as he could right there, even the garters. He lit up the pipe and said he'd never had a better smoke, which wasn't quite true because the pipe wasn't broken in yet. Pete Manners had had it lying around ever since he'd received it as a gift 4 years ago from an out-of-town relative who hadn't known he'd stopped smoking. Dan put the tobacco into the bowl very carefully. Tobacco was precious. It was only pure luck that Pat Riley had decided to try to grow some in his backyard just before what had happened to Peaksville had happened. It didn't grow very well, and then they had to cure it and shred it and all, and it was just precious stuff. Everybody in town used wooden holders old McIntyre had made to save on butts. Last of all, Thelma Dunn gave Dan Hollis the record she had found. Dan's eyes misted even before he opened the package. He knew it was a record. "Gosh," he said softly, "what one is it? I'm almost afraid to look." "You haven't got it, darling." Ethel Hollis smiled. "Don't you remember? I asked you about You Are My Sunshine." "Oh, gosh," Dan said again. Carefully he removed the wrapping and stood there fondling the record, running his big hands over the worn grooves with their tiny, dulling crosswire scratches. He looked around the room, eyes shining, and they all smiled back, knowing how delighted he was. "Happy birthday, darling," Ethel said, throwing her arms around him and kissing him. He clutched the record in both hands, holding it off to one side as she pressed against him. "Hey," he laughed, pulling back his head. "Careful, I'm holding a priceless object." He looked around again over his wife's arms, which were still around his neck. His eyes were hungry. "Look, do you think we could play it? Lord, what I'd give to hear some new music. Just the first part, the orchestra part, before Cuomo sings." Faces sobered. After a minute, John Sippick said, "I don't think we'd better, Dan. After all, we don't know just where the singer comes in. It'd be taking too much of a chance. Better wait till you get home." Dan Hollis reluctantly put the record on the buffet and with all his other presents. "It's good," he said, automatically but disappointedly, "that I can't play it here." "Oh, yes," said Sippick. "It's good." To compensate for Dan's disappointed tone, he repeated, "It's good." They ate dinner, the candles lighting their smiling faces, and ate it all down just to the last delicious drop of gravy. They complimented Mom and Aunt Amy on the roast beef, and the peas and carrots and the tender corn on the cob. The corn hadn't come from Fremont's cornfield, naturally. Everybody knew what was out there, and the field was going to weeds. Then they polished off the dessert, homemade ice cream and cookies, and then they sat back in the flickering light of the candles and chatted, waiting for television. There never was a lot of mumbling on television night. Everybody came in and had a good dinner at the Fremonts, and that was nice. And afterwards there was television, and nobody really thought much about that. It just had to be put up with. So it was a pleasant enough get together. Aside from your having to watch what you said was just as carefully as you always did every place. If a dangerous thought came into your mind and you just started mumbling, even right in the middle of the sentence, when you did that, the others just ignored you until you felt happier again and stopped. Anthony liked television nights. He had done only 2 or 3 awful things on television nights in the past year. Mom had put a bottle of brandy on the table, and they each had a tiny glass of it. Liquor was even more precious than tobacco. The villagers could make wine, but the grapes weren't right, and certainly the techniques weren't, and it wasn't very good wine. There were only a few bottles of real liquor left in the village: 4 rye, 3 Scotch, 3 brandy, 9 real wine, and half a bottle of drambuie belonging to old McIntyre, only for marriages. And when those were gone, that was it. Afterward, everybody wished that the brandy hadn't been brought out, because Dan Hollis drank more of it than he should have, and mixed it with a lot of the homemade wine. Nobody thought anything about it at first, because he didn't show it much outside, and it was his birthday party, and a happy party, and Anthony liked these get-togethers and shouldn't see any reason to do anything, even if he was listening. But Dan Hollis got high and did a fool thing. If they'd seen it coming, they'd have taken him outside and walked him around. The first thing they knew, Dan stopped laughing right at the middle of the story about how Thelma Dunn had found the Perry Como record and dropped it, and it hadn't broken because she'd moved faster than she ever had before in her life and caught it. He was fondling the record again and looking longingly at the Fremont's gramophone over in the corner. And suddenly he stopped laughing, and his face got slack. And then it got ugly, and he said, "Oh, Christ!" Immediately the room was still. So still they could hear the whirring movement of the grandfather's clock out in the hall. Pat Riley had been playing the piano softly. He stopped. His hands poised over the yellowed keys. The candles on the dining room table flickered in a cool breeze that blew through the lace curtains over the bay window. "Keep playing, Pat," Anthony's father said softly. Pat started again. He played night and day, but his eyes were sideways on Dan Hollis, and he missed notes. Dan stood in the middle of the room holding the record. In his other hand he held a glass of brandy so hard his hand shook. They were all looking at him. "Christ," he said again, and he made it sound like a dirty word. Reverend Younger, who had been talking with Mom and Aunt Amy by the dining room door, said "Christ" too, but he was using it as a prayer. His hands were clasped, and his eyes were closed. John Sippick moved forward. "Now, Dan, it's good for you to talk that way, but you don't want to talk too much, you know?" Dan shook off the hand Sippick put on his arm. "Can't even play my record," he said loudly. He looked down at the record and then around at their faces. "Oh, my God!" He threw the glassful of brandy against the wall. It splattered and ran down the wallpaper in streaks. Some of the women gasped. "Dan," Sippick said in a whisper, "cut it out!" Pat Riley was playing Night and Day louder to cover up the sounds of the talk. It wouldn't do any good, though, if Anthony was listening. Dan Hollis went over to the piano and stood by Pat's shoulder, swaying a little. "Pat," he said, "don't play that. Play this." And then he began to sing. Softly, hoarsely, miserably. "Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me." "Dan!" Ethel Hollis screamed. She tried to run across the room to him. Mary Sippick grabbed her arm and held her back. "Dan!" Ethel screamed again. "Stop!" "My God, be quiet!" hissed Mary Sippick, and pushed her toward one of the men, who put his hand over her mouth and held her still. "Happy birthday, dear Danny," Dan sang. "Happy birthday to me." He stopped and looked down at Pat Riley. "Play it, Pat. Play it so I can sing it right. You know I can't carry a tune unless somebody plays it." Pat Riley put his hand on the keys and began Lover in a slow waltz tempo, the way Anthony liked it. Pat's face was white. His hands fumbled. Dan Hollis stared over at the dining room door, at Anthony's mother and Anthony's father, who had gone to join her. "You had him," he said, tears gleaming on his cheeks as the candlelight caught them. "You had to go and have him." He closed his eyes, and the tears squeezed out. He sang loudly, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when I am blue." Anthony came into the room. Pat stopped playing. He froze. Everybody froze. The breeze rippled the curtains. Ethel Hollis couldn't even try to scream. She had fainted. "Please don't take my sunshine away." Dan's voice faltered into silence. His eyes widened. He put both hands out in front of him, the empty glass in one, the record in the other. He hiccuped and said, "No." "Bad man," Anthony said, and brought Dan Hollis into something like nothing, and thought Dan Hollis into something like nothing anyone would have believed possible. And then he thought the thing into a grave deep in the cornfield. The glass and record thumped on the rug. Neither broke. Anthony's purple gaze went around the room. Some of the people began mumbling. They all tried to smile. The sound of mumbling filled the room like a far-off approval. Out of the murmuring came one or two clear voices. "Oh, it's a very good thing," said John Sippick. "A good thing," said Anthony's father, smiling. He'd had more practice in smiling than most of them. "A wonderful thing." "It's swell, just swell," said Pat Riley, tears leaking from his eyes and nose, and he began to play the piano again, softly, his trembling hands feeling for Night and Day. Anthony climbed up on top of the piano, and Pat played for 2 hours. Afterward, they watched television. They all went into the front room and lit just a few candles and pulled up chairs around the set. It was a small screen set, and they couldn't all sit close enough to it to see, but that didn't matter. They didn't even turn the set on. It wouldn't have worked anyway, there being no electricity in Peaksville. They just sat silently and watched the twisting, writhing shapes on the screen and listened to the sounds that came out of the speaker, and none of them had any idea what it was all about. They never did. It was always the same. "It's real nice," Aunt Amy said once, her pale eyes on the meaningless flickers and shadows, "but I liked it a little better when there were cities outside and we could get real—" "Why, Amy," said Mom, "it's good for you to say such a thing. Very good. But how can you mean it? Why, this television is much better than anything we ever used to get." "Yes," chimed in John Sippick. "It's fine. It's the best show we've ever seen." He sat on the couch with two other men, holding Ethel Hollis flat against the cushions, holding her arms and legs and putting her hands over her mouth so she couldn't start screaming again. "It's really good." Mom looked out of the front window across the hardened road, across Henderson's darkened wheat field to the vast, endless gray nothingness in which the little village of Peaksville floated like a soul, the huge nothingness that was evident at night when Anthony's brassy day had gone. It did no good to wonder where they were, no good at all. Peaksville was just someplace away from the world. It was wherever it had been since that day 3 years ago when Anthony had crept from her womb and old Doc Bates, God rest him, had screamed and dropped him and tried to kill him, and Anthony had whined and done the thing. He had taken the village someplace, or had destroyed the world and left only the village. Nobody knew which. It did no good to wonder about it. Nothing at all did any good except to live as they must live, must always live, if Anthony would let them. These thoughts were dangerous, she thought. She began to mumble. The others started mumbling too. They had all been thinking, evidently. The men on the couch whispered and whispered to Ethel Hollis. When they took their hands away, she mumbled too. While Anthony sat on top of the set and made television, they sat around and mumbled and watched the meaningless flickering shapes far into the night. Next day it snowed and killed off half the crops. But it was a good day. Oh, I forgot to change the cover image. No! That was "It's a Good Life" by Jerome Bixby. If you picked up on it, it is the story that one of the most iconic Twilight Zone episodes was based on. A fantastic story. Love it. So, thank you all so much for being here. It might be. Who knows? Stop moving my mic around. So, let's stay right there. I've got a shorter one for you next. This one is about a society that places a very high value on intelligence. And this story is about what happens when somebody doesn't quite measure up. This is Examination Day by Henry Slessor. The Jordans never spoke of the exam, not until their son Dickie was 12 years old. It was on his birthday that Mrs. Jordan first mentioned the subject in his presence, and the anxious manner of her speech caused her husband to answer sharply. "Forget about it," he said. "He'll do all right." I do. I just forgot to change it. Like I did for the last one. They were at the breakfast table, and the boy looked up from his plate curiously. He was an alert-eyed youngster with flat blonde hair and a quick, nervous manner. He didn't understand what the sudden tension was about, but he did know that today was his birthday, and he wanted harmony above all. Somewhere in the little apartment there were wrapped, beribboned packages waiting to be opened, and in the tiny wall kitchen something warm and sweet was being prepared in the automatic stove. He wanted the day to be happy, and the moistness of his mother's eyes, the scowl on his father's face, spoiled the mood of fluttering expectation with which he had greeted the morning. "What exam?" he asked. His mother looked at the tablecloth. "It's just a sort of government intelligence test they give children at the age of 12. You'll be taking it next week. It's nothing to worry about." "You mean like a test in school?" "Something like that," his father said, getting up from the table. "Go and read your comics, Dickie." The boy rose and wandered towards that part of the living room which had been his corner since infancy. He fingered the topmost comic off the stack, but seemed uninterested in the colorful squares of fast-paced action. He wandered towards the window and peered gloomily at the veil of mist that shrouded the glass. "Why did it have to rain today?" he said. "Why couldn't it rain tomorrow?" His father now slumped into an armchair with the government newspaper, rattled the sheets in vexation. "Because it just did, that's all. Rain makes the grass grow." "Why, Dad?" "Because it does, that's all." Dickie puckered his brow. "What makes it green, though, the grass?" "Nobody knows," his father snapped, then immediately regretted his abruptness. Later in the day it was birthday time again. His mother beamed as she handed over the gaily colored packages, and even his father managed a grin and a rumple of the hair. He kissed his mother and shook hands gravely with his father. Then the birthday cake was brought forth, and the ceremonies concluded. An hour later, seated by the window, he watched the sun force its way between the clouds. "Dad," he said, "how far away is the sun?" 5,000 miles, his father had said. Dickie sat at the breakfast table again and saw moisture in his mother's eyes. He didn't connect her tears with the exam until his father suddenly brought the subject to light again. "Well, Dickie," he said, with a manly frown, "you've got an appointment today." "I know, Dad. I hope—" "Now, it's nothing to worry about. Thousands of children take this test every day. The government wants to know how smart you are, Dickie. That's all there is to it." "I get good marks in school," he said hesitantly. "Well, this is different. This is a special kind of test. They give you this stuff to drink, you see, and then you go into a room where there's a sort of machine." "What stuff to drink?" Dickie said. "It's nothing. It tastes like peppermint. It's just to make sure you answer the questions truthfully. Not that the government thinks you won't tell the truth, but it makes sure." Dickie's face showed puzzlement and a touch of fright. He looked at his mother, and she composed her face into a misty smile. "Everything will be all right," she said. "Well, of course it will," his father agreed. "You're a good boy, Dickie. You'll make out fine. Then we'll come home and celebrate, all right?" "Yes, sir," Dickie said. They entered the government educational building 15 minutes before the appointed hour. They crossed the marble floors of the great pillared lobby, passed beneath an archway, and entered an automatic lift that brought them to the 4th floor. There was a young man wearing an insignia-less tunic, seated at a polished desk in front of room 404. He held a clipboard in his hand, and he checked the list down the J's and permitted the Jordans to enter. The room was cold and official as a courtroom, with long benches flanking metal tables. There were several fathers and sons already there, and a thin-lipped woman with cropped black hair was passing out sheets of paper. Mr. Jordan filled out the form and returned it to the clerk. Then he told Dickie, "It won't be long now. When they call your name, you just go through the doorway at the end of the room." He indicated the portal with his finger. A concealed loudspeaker crackled and called off the first name. Dickie saw a boy leave his father's side reluctantly and walk slowly towards the door. 5 minutes to 11, they called the name of Jordan. "Good luck, son," his father said, without looking at him. "I'll call for you when the test is over." Dickie walked to the door and turned the knob. The room inside was dim, and he could barely make out the features of the gray-tunicked attendant who greeted him. "Sit down," the man said softly. He indicated a high stool beside his desk. "Your name's Richard Jordan?" "Yes, sir." "Your classification number is 600-115. Drink this, Richard." He lifted a plastic cup from the desk and handed it to the boy. The liquid inside had the consistency of buttermilk, tasted only vaguely of the promised peppermint. Dickie downed it and handed the man the empty cup. He sat in silence, feeling drowsy, while the man wrote busily on a sheet of paper. Then the attendant looked at his watch and rose to stand only inches from Dickie's face. He unclipped a pen-like object from the pocket of his tunic and flashed a tiny light into the boy's eyes. "All right," he said. "Come with me, Richard." He led Dickie to the end of the room, where a single wooden armchair faced a multi-dialed computing machine. There was a microphone in the left arm of the chair. When the boy sat down, he found its pinpoint head conveniently at his mouth. "Now, just relax, Richard. You'll be asked some questions, and you think them over carefully, then give your answers into the microphone. The machine will take care of the rest." "Yes, sir." "I'll leave you alone now. Whenever you want to start, just say 'ready' into the microphone." "Yes, sir." The man squeezed his shoulder and left. Dickie said, "Ready." Lights appeared on the machine, and a mechanism whirred. A voice said, "Complete this sequence. 1, 4, 7, 10. Mr. and Mrs. Jordan were in the living room, not speaking, not even speculating. It was almost 4 o'clock when the telephone rang. The woman tried to reach it first, but her husband was quicker. "Mr. Jordan?" The voice was clipped, a brisk, official voice. "Yes, speaking." "This is the Government Educational Service. Your son, Richard M. Jordan, classification 600-115, has completed the government examination. We regret to inform you that his intelligence quotient is above the government regulation, according to Rule 84, Section 5 of the new code." Across the room, the woman cried out, knowing nothing except the emotion she read on her husband's face. You may specify by telephone, the voice droned on, whether you wish his body interned by the government or would you prefer a private burial place. The fee for government burial is $10. Whoops. Yeah, that's a tough one. It's short, but that hits hard. All right, so I've got one more for you tonight. And I think this one you will certainly enjoy. Just have to bring it up here. Basically, he failed the test, so he was put to rest. Basically, if you fail the test, you don't continue on in this society. Yeah, that's a dark one. That's a dark one. I know, I have to find some stories that have happy endings. Yes, he was terminated. Where did you go? There you are. All right. So how are we enjoying the stories this evening? So far, are we good? We liking the stories? We not liking the stories? You guys dislike me just a little bit? All right. So this story is a little different. It starts with a simple question. What would you do if someone offered you a box with a button on it and told you that if you pressed it, you would receive a large sum of money? But someone, somewhere, would die. This one is Button Button by Richard Matheson. The package was lying by the front door, a cube-shaped carton sealed with tape. The name and address printed by hand, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Lewis, 217 East 37th Street, New York, New York, 10016. Norma picked it up, unlocked the door, and went into the apartment. It was just getting dark. After she put the lamb chops on the broiler, she made herself a drink and sat down to open the package. Inside the carton was a push-button unit fastened to a small wooden box. A glass dome covered the button. Norma tried to lift it off, but it was locked in place. She turned the unit over and saw a folded piece of paper scotch-taped to the bottom of the box. She pulled it off. Mr. Seward will call you at 8 p.m. Norma put the button unit beside on her couch. She sipped the drink and reread the typed note, smiling. A few moments later, she walked back into the kitchen to make the salad. The doorbell rang at 8 o'clock. "I'll get it," Norma called from the kitchen. Arthur was in the living room reading. There was a small man in the hallway. He removed his hat as Norma opened the door. "Mrs. Lewis?" he inquired politely. "Yes." "I'm Mr. Stewart." "Oh, yes." Norma repressed a smile. She was sure now it was a sales pitch. "May I come in?" asked Mr. Stewart. "I'm rather busy," Norma said. "I'll get your whatchamacallit, though." She turned She started to turn. "Don't you want to know what it is?" Norma turned back. Mr. Stewart's tone had been offensive. "No, I don't think I do," she said. "It could prove very valuable," he told her. "Monetarily?" she challenged. Mr. Stewart nodded. "Monetarily," he said. Norma frowned. She didn't like his attitude. "What are you trying to sell?" she asked. "I'm not selling anything," he answered. Arthur came out of the living room. "Something wrong?" Mr. Stewart introduced himself. "Oh, Arthur pointed toward the living room and smiled. "What is that gadget, anyway?" "Oh, Arthur, what is that gadget, anyway?" "It won't take long to explain," replied Mr. Stewart. "May I come in?" "If you're selling something," Arthur said. Mr. Stewart shook his head. "I'm not." Arthur looked at Norma. "Up to you," she said. He hesitated. "Well, why not?" he said. They went into the living room, and Mr. Stewart sat in Norma's chair. He reached out an inside coat pocket and withdrew a small, sealed envelope. "Inside here is a key to the Bell Unit dome," he said. He set the envelope on the chairside table. "The bell is connected to our office." "What's it for?" asked Arthur. "If you push the button," Mr. Stewart told him, "somewhere in the world, someone you don't know will die, in return for which you will receive a payment of $50,000. Norma stared at the small man. He was smiling. "What are you talking about?" Arthur asked him. Mr. Stewart looked surprised. "But I've just explained," he said. "Is this a practical joke?" asked Arthur. "No, not at all. This offer is completely genuine." "You aren't making sense," Arthur said. "You expect us to believe—" "Whom do you represent?" demanded Norma. Mr. Stewart looked embarrassed. "I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to tell you that," he said. "However, I assure you the organization is of international scope." "I think you'd better leave," Arthur said, standing. Mr. Stewart rose. "Of course." "And take your button unit with you." "Are you sure you wouldn't care to think about it for a day or so?" Arthur picked up the button unit and the envelope and thrust them into Mr. Stewart's hands. He walked into the hall and pulled open the door. "I'll leave my card," said Mr. Stewart. He placed it on the table by the door. When he was gone, Arthur tore it in half and tossed the pieces onto the table. "God!" he said. Norma was still sitting on the sofa. "What do you think it was?" she asked. "I don't care to know," he answered. She tried to smile, but couldn't. "Aren't you curious at all?" "No." He shook his head. After Arthur returned to his book, Norma went back to the kitchen and finished washing the dishes. "Why won't you talk about it?" Norma asked later. Arthur's eyes shifted as he brushed his teeth. He looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Doesn't it intrigue you?" "It offends me," Arthur said. "I know, but—" Norma rolled another curler in her hair. "Doesn't it intrigue you, too?" "You think it's a practical joke?" she asked as they went into the bedroom. "If it is, it's a sick one." Norma sat on the bed and took off her slippers. "Maybe it's some kind of psychological research." Arthur shrugged. "It could be." "Maybe some eccentric millionaire is doing it." "Maybe." "Wouldn't you like to know?" Arthur shook his head. "Why?" "Because it's immoral," he told her. Norma slid beneath the covers. "Well, I think it's intriguing," she said. Arthur turned off the lamp and leaned over to kiss her. "Good night," he said. "Good night." She patted his back. Norma closed her eyes. $50,000, she thought. In the morning, as she left the apartment, Norma saw the card halves on the table. Impulsively, she dropped them into her purse. She locked the front door and joined Arthur in the elevator. While she was on her coffee break, she took the card halves from her purse and held the torn edges together. Only Mr. Stewart's name and telephone number were printed on the card. After lunch, she took the card halves from her purse again and scotch-taped the edges together. "Why am I doing this?" she thought. Just before 5, she dialed the number. "Good afternoon," said Mr. Stewart's voice. Norma almost hung up, but restrained herself. She cleared her throat. "This is Mrs. Lewis," she said. "Yes, Mrs. Lewis." Mr. Stewart sounded pleased. "I'm curious." "That's natural," Mr. Stewart said. "Not that I believe a word of what you told us." "Oh, it's quite authentic," Mr. Stewart answered. "Well, whatever," Norma swallowed. "When you said someone in the world would die, what did you mean?" Exactly that," he answered. "It could be anyone. All we guarantee is that you don't know them, and of course that you wouldn't have to watch them die." "For $50,000, Norma said. "That is correct." She made a scoffing noise. "That's crazy." "Nonetheless, that is the proposition," Mr. Stewart said. "Would you like me to return the button unit?" Norma stiffened. "Certainly not." She hung up angrily. The package was lying by the front door. Norma saw it as she left the elevator. "Well, of all the nerve," she thought. She glared at the carton as she unlocked the door. "I just won't take it in," she thought. She went inside and started dinner. Later, she carried her drink to the front hall. Opening the door, she picked up the package and carried it into the kitchen, leaving it on the table. She sat in the living room, sipping her drink and looking out the window. After a while, she went back into the kitchen to turn the cutlets in the broiler. She put the package in a bottom cabinet. She'd throw it out in the morning. "Maybe some eccentric millionaire is playing games with people," she said. Arthur looked up from his dinner. "I don't understand you." "What does that mean?" "Let it go," he told her. Norma ate in silence. Suddenly she put her fork down. "Suppose it's a genuine offer," she said. Arthur stared at her. "Suppose it's a genuine offer." "All right, suppose it is." He looked incredulous. "What would you like to do?" "Get the button back and push it? Murder someone?" Norma looked disgusted. "Murder? Well, how would you define it?" "If you don't even know the person?" Norma asked. Arthur looked astounded. "Are you saying what I think you are? If it's some old Chinese peasant 10,000 miles away, some diseased native of the Congo." "How about some baby boy in Pennsylvania?" Arthur countered. "Some beautiful little girl in the next block." "Oh, now you're loading things." "The point is, Norma," he continued, "that who you kill makes no difference. It's still murder." "The point is," Norma broke in, "if it's someone you've never seen in your life and never will see, someone whose death you don't even have to know about, you still wouldn't push the button." Arthur stared at her, appalled. "You mean you would?" $50,000, Arthur. "What has the amount—" $50,000, Arthur, Norma interrupted. A chance to take that trip to Europe we've always talked about. Norma, no. A chance to buy that cottage on the island. Norma, no. He was white. For God's sake, no. She shuddered. All right, take it easy. Why are you getting so upset? It's only talk. After dinner, Arthur went into the living room. Before he left the table, he said, I'd rather not discuss it any more, if you don't mind. Norma shrugged. Fine by me. She got up earlier than usual to make pancakes, eggs, and bacon for Arthur's breakfast. What's the occasion? He asked with a smile. No occasion. Norma looked offended. I wanted to do it, that's all. Good, he said. I'm glad you did. She refilled his cup. Wanted to show you I'm not... She shrugged. Not what? Selfish. Did I say you were? Well, she gestured vaguely, last night... Arthur didn't speak. All that talk about the button, Norma said. I think you, misunderstood me. In what way? His voice was guarded. I think you felt, she gestured again, that I was only thinking of myself. Oh? I wasn't. Norma, I wasn't. When I talked about Europe, a cottage on the island... Norma, why are we getting so involved in this? I'm not involved at all, she drew in a shaking breath. I'm simply trying to indicate that... What? That I'd like us to go to Europe. Like for us to have a nicer apartment, nicer furniture, nicer clothes, for us to finally have a baby, for that matter. Norma, we will, he said. When? He stared at her in dismay. Norma, when? Are you... He seemed to draw back slightly. Are you really saying... I'm saying that they're probably doing it for some research project, she cut him off, that they want to know what average people would do under such a circumstance, that they're just saying someone would die in order to study reactions, see if there'd be guilt, anxiety, whatever. You don't really think they'd kill somebody, do you? Arthur didn't answer. She saw his hands trembling. After a while, he got up and left. When he'd gone to work, Norma remained at the table, staring into her coffee. I'm going to be late, she thought. She shrugged. What difference did it make? She should be home anyways, not working in an office. While she was stacking the dishes, she turned abruptly, dried her hands, and took the package from the bottom cabinet. Opening it, she set the button unit on the table. She stared at it for a long time before taking the key from its envelope and removing the glass dome. She stared at it for a long time before taking... She stared at the button. How ridiculous, she thought. All this over a meaningless button. Reaching out, she pressed it down. For us, she thought angrily. She shuddered. What is happening? A chill of horror swept across her. In a moment it had passed. She made a contemptuous noise. Ridiculous, she thought, to get so worked up over nothing. She had just turned the supper steaks and was making herself another drink when the telephone rang. She picked it up. Hello? Mrs. Lewis? Yes. This is the Lenox Hill Hospital? She felt unreal as the voice informed her of the subway accident, the shoving crowd. Arthur was pushed from the platform in front of the train. She was conscious of shaking her head but couldn't stop. As she hung up, she remembered Arthur's life insurance policy for $25,000 with double indemnity for... No. She couldn't seem to breathe. She struggled to her feet and walked in the kitchen humbly. Something cold pressed at her skull as she removed the button unit from the wastebasket. There were no nails or screws visible. She couldn't see how it was put together. Abruptly, she began to smash it on the sink edge, pounding it harder and harder until the wood split. She pulled the sides apart, cutting her fingers without noticing. There were no transistors in the box, no wires or tubes. The box was empty. She whirled with a gasp as the telephone rang. Stumbling into the living room, she picked up the receiver. "Mrs. Lewis?" Mr. Stewart asked. It wasn't her voice shrieking, so it couldn't be. "You said I wouldn't know the one that died." "My dear lady," Mr. Stewart said, "do you really think you knew your husband?" Dun, dun, dun. Oh. But it was. I guess she didn't really know him after all. Dun, dun, dun. Oh boy, that was fun. That was a fun one. Interestingly enough, we seem to have some time left. Well. Well, I think I know exactly what we need to do here. Matheson is a he was really good at just twisting. It was great. Oh, let's see here. So I guess we have a choice. Let me see what I could find that might be another quick read. I have not read The Troll Under the Bridge. I'll have to look that one up. The good news is that I have a bit of a catalog going of stories that we can read. Let's see what we've got here. Well, oh, here's a good one. And it's relatively short. Let's see. Just have to bring it up. So I've started collecting stories, And this one is by a gentleman by the name of Hector Hugh Monroe. His pen name was Saki, S-A-K-I. He was a 19th century author. And this story is called The Storyteller. It was a hot afternoon, and the railway carriage was correspondingly sultry, and the next stop was at Templecombe, nearly an hour ahead. The occupants of the carriage were a small girl and a smaller girl and a small boy. An aunt belonging to the children occupied one corner seat, and the further corner seat on the opposite side was occupied by a bachelor who was a stranger to their party. But the small girls and the small boy emphatically occupied the compartment. Both the aunt and the children were conversational in a limited, persistent way, reminding one of the attentions of a housefly that refuses to be discouraged. Most of the aunt's remarks seemed to begin with "don't," and nearly all of the children's remarks began with "why?" The bachelor said nothing out loud. "Don't, Cyril, don't!" exclaimed the aunt, as the small boy began smacking the cushions of the seat, producing a cloud of dust at each blow. "Come look out the window," she added. The child moved reluctantly to the window. "Why are those sheep being driven out of that field?" he asked. "Well, I expect they are being driven to another field where there is more grass," said the aunt weakly. "But there's lots of grass in that field," protested the boy. "There's nothing else but grass there. Aunt, there's lots of grass in that field." "Perhaps the grass in the other field is better," suggested the aunt fatuously. "Why is it better?" came the swift, inevitable question. "Oh, look at those cows!" exclaimed the aunt. Nearly every field along the line had contained cows or bullocks, but she spoke as though she were drawing attention to a rarity. "Why is the grass in the other field better?" persisted Cyril. The frown on the bachelor's face was deepening to a scowl. He was a hard, unsympathetic man, the aunt decided in her mind. She was utterly unable to come to any satisfactory decision about the grass in the other field. The smaller girl created a diversion by beginning to recite "On the Road to Mandalay." She only knew the first line, but she put her limited knowledge to the fullest possible use. She repeated the line over and over again in a dreamy but resolute and very audible voice. It seemed to the bachelor as though someone had had a bet with her that she could not repeat the line aloud 2,000 times without stopping. Whoever it was had made the wager was likely to lose his bet. "Come over here and listen to a story," said the aunt, when the bachelor had looked twice at her and once at the communication cord. The children moved listlessly towards the aunt's end of the carriage. Evidently her reputation as a storyteller did not rank high in their estimation. In a low, confidential voice, interrupted at frequent intervals by loud, petulant questionings from her listeners, she began an unenterprising and deplorably uninteresting story about a little girl who was good and made friends with everyone on account of her goodness, and was finally saved from a mad bull by a number of rescuers who admired her moral character. "Why wouldn't they have saved her if she hadn't been good?" demanded the bigger of the small girls. It was exactly the question that the bachelor had wanted to ask. "Well, yes," admitted the aunt lamely, "but I don't think they would have run quite so fast to help her if they had not liked her so much." "It's the stupidest story I've ever heard," said the bigger of the small girls with immense conviction. "I didn't listen after the first bit, it was so stupid," said Cyril. The smaller girl made no actual comment on the story, but she had long ago recommenced a murmured repetition of her favorite line. "You don't seem to be a success as a storyteller," said the bachelor suddenly from his corner. The ant bristled in instant defense at this unexpected attack. "It is a very difficult thing to tell stories that children can both understand and appreciate," she said stiffly. "I don't agree with you," said the bachelor. "Perhaps you would like to tell them a story," was the ant's retort. "Tell us a story," demanded the bigger of the small girls. "Once upon a time," began the bachelor, "there was a little girl named Bertha, who was extraordinarily good." The children's momentarily aroused interests began at once to flicker. All stories seemed dreadfully alike, no matter who told them. "She did all that she was told. She was always truthful. She kept her clothes clean, ate milk puddings as though they were jam tarts, learned her lessons perfectly, and was polite in her manners." "Was she pretty?" asked the bigger of the small girls. "Not as pretty as any of you," said the bachelor, "but she was horribly good." There was a wave of reaction in favor of the story. The word horrible in connection with goodness was a novelty that commended itself. It seemed to introduce a ring of truth that was absent from the ant's tales of infant life. "She was so good," continued the bachelor, "that she even won several medals for goodness, which she always wore pinned on her dress. There was a medal for obedience, another medal for punctuality, and a third for good behavior. They were large metal medals, and they clinked together against one another as she walked. No other child in town where she lived had as many as 3 medals, so everybody knew that she must be an extra good child." "Horribly good," quoted Cyril. "Everybody talked about her goodness, and the prince of the country got to hear about it, and he said that she was so very good that she might be allowed once a week to walk in his park, which was just outside the town. It was a beautiful park, and no children were ever allowed in it, so it was a great honor for Bertha to be allowed to go there." "Were there any sheep in the park?" demanded Cyril. "No," said the bachelor. "There were no sheep." "Why weren't there any sheep?" came the inevitable question arising out of that answer. The ant permitted herself a smile which might also have been described as a grin. "There were no sheep in the park." I should probably, because I don't have an image for this, so I'll just set it back to my Storytime cover. The ant permitted herself a smile which might almost have been described as a grin. "There were no sheep in the park," said the bachelor, "because the prince's mother had once had a dream that her son would either be killed by a sheep or else by a clock falling on him. For that reason, the prince never kept a sheep in his park or a clock in his palace." The ant suppressed a gasp of admiration. "Was the prince killed by a sheep or by a clock?" asked Cyril. "He is still alive, so we can't tell whether the dream will come true," said the bachelor unconcernedly. "Anyway, there were no sheep in the park, but there were lots of little pigs running all over the place." "What color were they?" "Black with white faces, white with black spots, black all over, gray with white patches, and some were white all over." The storyteller paused to let the full idea of the park's treasures sink into the children's imaginations. Then he resumed. Bertha was sorry to find that there were no flowers in the park. She had promised her aunts with tears in her eyes that she would not pick any of the kind prince's flowers, and she had meant to keep her promise, so of course it made her feel silly to find that there were no flowers to pick. "Why weren't there any flowers?" because the pigs had eaten them all, said the bachelor promptly. The gardeners had told the prince that you couldn't have pigs and flowers, so he decided to have pigs and no flowers. There was a murmur of approval at the excellence of the prince's decision. So many people would have decided the other way. There were lots of other delightful things in the park. There were ponds with gold and blue and green fish in them, and trees with beautiful parrots that said clever things at a moment's notice, and humming birds that hummed all the popular tunes of the day. Bertha walked up and down and enjoyed herself immensely, and thought to herself, "If I were not so extraordinarily good, I should not have been allowed to come into this beautiful park and enjoy all that there is to be seen in it." And her 3 medals clinked against one another as she walked, and helped to remind her how very good she really was. Just then, an enormous wolf came prowling into the park to see if it could catch a fat little pig for its supper. "What color was it?" asked the children amid a immediate quickening of interest. "Mud color all over, with a black tongue and pale gray eyes that gleamed with unspeakable ferocity." The first thing it saw in the park was Bertha. Her pinafore was so spotlessly white and clean that it could be seen from a great distance. Bertha saw the wolf and saw that it was stealing towards her, and she began to wish that she had never been allowed to come into the park. She ran as hard as she could, and the wolf came after her with huge leaps and bounds. She managed to reach a shrubbery of myrtle bushes, and she hid herself in one of the thickest bushes. The wolf came sniffing among the branches, its black tongue lolling out of its mouth, its pale gray eyes glaring with rage. Bertha was terribly frightened, and thought to herself, "If I had not been so extraordinarily good, I should have been safe in the town at this moment." However, the scent of myrtle was so strong that the wolf could not sniff out where Bertha was hiding, and the bushes were so thick that he might have hunted about in them for a long time without catching sight of her. So he thought he might as well go off and catch a little pig instead. Bertha was trembling very much at having the wolf prowling and sniffing so near her, and as she trembled, the medal for obedience clinked against the medals for good conduct and punctuality. The wolf was just moving away when he heard the sound of the medals clinking and stopped to listen. They clinked again in a bush quite near him. He dashed into the bush, his pale gray eyes gleaming with ferocity and triumph, and dragged Bertha out and devoured her to the last morsel. All that was left of her were her shoes, bits of clothing, and 3 medals for goodness. "Were any of the little pigs killed?" "No, they all escaped." "The story began badly," said the smaller of the small girls, "but it had a beautiful ending." "It's the most beautiful story I'd ever heard," said the bigger of the small girls with immense decision. "It is the only beautiful story I have ever heard," said Cyril. The dissentient opinion came from the aunt. "A most improper story to tell young children. You have undermined the effect of years of careful teaching." "At any rate," said the bachelor, collecting his belongings preparatory to leave the carriage, "I kept them quiet for 10 minutes, which was more than you were able to do." "Unhappy woman," he observed to himself as he walked down the platform of Templecombe Station. "For the next 6 months or so, those children will assail her in public with demands for an improper story." Oh, boy. All righty then. So I think that's where we're going to leave it tonight. That was a random pick, but it was very O. Henry. And actually, I have a O. Henry is on one of my ones that'll be reading. There's one called Ransom of Red Chief, which is just hilarious. So eventually, I'll be reading that one. But yes, so that is where we are going to stop for the evening. I cannot wait for Sunday either, Strawberry. We'll be bringing the story of Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim to its conclusion. And I will reveal to you guys then what we will be starting to read the following Sunday. But I can't tell you yet, because it's a secret. Well, thank you guys for coming in and hanging out with me tonight. I truly, truly appreciate it. It's been a fun night, and it's been a good Friday live. I really interested. Thank you. I really appreciate that you come in so much, and yeah. So I can't wait for your boys to hear the end of the story on Sunday. I know they've been listening quite diligently the last few Sundays, so I really appreciate that. So, as I was saying, join me again on Sunday as we bring Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim to its conclusion. And on Wednesday, I'll be reading more short fiction, possibly some horror, possibly some fantasy, possibly some science fiction. Thank you. And if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing. It is $2.99 a month. There's a link on my channel, and it helps keep the campfire lit. Until then, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night.